Hi everyone, welcome to today's Legal 101, being a Wednesdays on family and succession law, but just one time for the son. Okay, it's giving. Anyway, so we are shifting gears from what we have been discussing the last couple of Wednesdays, which is children and the law, and today we are discussing succession. Now, if a person dies without a will, they are deemed to have died intestate. Whether or not somebody dies before writing a will, the deceased person's estate must go through a court process called succession. I'm pretty sure you've heard about succession. Now, an estate of a deceased person is described as free property of that person, and free property means property that the deceased person had capacity to dispose of during his or her lifetime. Meaning, if the deceased person took a loan and used the title over the property as security, that is not free property. If the deceased person was in the process of selling that property, that is not free property. If the deceased person sold the property, it is not free property. Now, usually the succession process will culminate in the issuance of a grant of representation, which is typically confirmed after 6 months. It simply says that person A, persons B and A, persons A, B, C, D have authority to distribute the property belonging to the deceased in the following manner, and the rest of the dependents and the beneficiaries have agreed to that mode of distribution. This grant of representation can be revoked for various reasons. We will talk about them as we go along, but today we are talking about one of the most common reasons, which is that it was obtained fraudulently by the making of a false statement or by the concealment from the court of something material to the case. And we've used one example of a judgment that was delivered by Justice Nyakundi in 2018. He was a judge. It was a matter in a Kajiado High Court. And based on the facts and evidence provided, this is what happened. So somebody named Mr. Kimantiru passed away in 2009. One of his beneficiaries petitioned the court for grant of representation in Machakos and listed the properties of the deceased, including one Ngong property. Now, the court was not aware that the property did not belong to Mr. Kimantiru and went ahead to issue a grant of representation in April 2017. Turns out this particular property had actually been sold by Mr. Kimantiru in 1983 for 18,000 shillings. It was sold to Mr. Giathi and 2 other purchasers. As one does, if it's agricultural property, the purchasers go before the Land Control Board, then the district officer in Ngong, and they obtained consent to transfer this property. Unfortunately, Mr. Kimantiru never registered the transfer in their favor, and so title was never issued to Mr. Giathi. But Mr. Giathi and his family had actually moved into the property in 1977 and had been occupying this property. So that means then that by the time Mr. Giathi died, which was in 2013, they had been living there for almost 30 years. Now, after Mr. Giathi died, Mr. Kimantiru's family pretended that they were unaware that these people actually had bought this property and had been in occupation. So when they went to court for succession in 2017, they listed that property as one of the properties belonging to the deceased patriarch. Now, and before they could even get a confirmation of the grant, one of the representatives caused this property to be registered in her name and another person, which is an illegality. It is something called intermeddling, where a person who does not have capacity to deal with a property deals in it or sells it, subdivides it. It is an illegal process whether or not you collude with land registrars. It is illegal. You must first wait for the court to issue a grant of representation before you deal in the property that does not belong to you and belongs to the deceased person. So Mr. Giathi's family also chose 2 people to obtain grant of representation for Mr. Giathi's family. They brought a case before Justice Nyakundi and they said, look, this other Machakos matter has a list, okay, of properties belonging to Mr. Kimantiru, and this Ngong property should not be there. Of course, Mr. Kimantiru's family denied all claims. They denied having lied to the court in Machakos, etc. And they said, actually, This is not an issue about succession. This is an issue about ownership of land, determining who owns his property, and that is not something that the succession court has capacity to deal in or capacity to determine. And the court agreed, said, yes, we do not have capacity to determine the validity of a sale agreement and enforce it. But if there existed a sale agreement and you did not tell the Machakos court, then you concealed material facts before that court. The court did not have the pleasure to make an informed decision, and for that reason, that grant should be revoked. And so the court directed that the grant be revoked, that the land registrar be directed to register an inhibition on the property until it was transferred to the representatives of Mr. Giathi's estate, and that if Mr. Kimantiro's representatives failed to sign the transfer document, the deputy registrar of the court was allowed to sign the transfers to effect the transfer. Now, being a succession matter, none of the parties was awarded costs, although we can clearly see who was wasting whose time. Okay, so finally, what you might have picked many things from what I have said, but for me, the lesson I wanted you to take today is that if you're conducting succession over the estate of a deceased person, please inform the court of all material facts. It is actually your duty, okay, as a litigant, I mean. And actually, I have said this more than once, your conduct during court proceedings is very important. If you're the kind of person who lies for no reason, courts will take cognizance of it. If you're the kind of person who is always late for things, file this by X number of days, you take 10 days later. Lying to the court over such things. You know, at the end of the day, the judges are just human beings, and we tend to gravitate towards people who don't give us a hard time, people who are straightforward, people who don't make things harder for us. You can imagine the court's workload, the things it has to consider, and you're there giving it a hard time when the law is clear on the things you are supposed to do and the things you're supposed to refrain from doing. So yeah, so that marks the end of today's Legal 101. We pick it up again next Wednesday. Okay, bye.